back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Sharika, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. We are finally on the road to 1,000 subscribers. And don't forget to like this video and leave a comment. If my students are watching this, make sure to go do your reading before you continue. Anyways, so today this video is going to be tapping into more of the lifestyle portion of this, this channel. I'm going to be talking about one of the most kind of complicated, difficult journeys I've had to make in my life, both literally and figuratively. So I'm going to be kind of sharing my immigration journey from Jamaica to becoming a permanent resident in Canada. So I kind of went back and forth between whether I should do this video or not, but ultimately decided I was going to do it because right now Canada is looking for a lot of immigrants. They have like a particular goal. I forget the exact number that they're trying to achieve. And so I have had quite a few people, express interest, whether it's to me personally or if I've seen it on social media. They've expressed interest in wanting to move to Canada and have questions about the whole process. Also, I thought that this would be a good video to share some of the mistakes I made in the immigration process so that hopefully people can learn from them and, maybe able to answer questions people might just already have about immigrating to Canada. So I got my coffee and I'm ready to spill the coffee. Instead of spill the tea. Anyway, so let me just give you some context. So I was born in Jamaica, went to high school in Jamaica. For those of you who don't know, I actually left Jamaica when I was 17 and I went to university in the States. I went to a school called Clark University. It's a small liberal arts school in Worcester, Massachusetts. And I got my undergrad in psychology, and then I had a minor in education. Then I did my master's in teaching. So for those of you who don't know, I already have I have a master's degree. Got it when I was 22 years old, which I'm very proud of myself for. Anyway, and there is like a program, I guess you could call it. It's like the OPT program that is offered to students in the US, university students in the US, or graduate students in the US, where they can get a year of work after they graduate from their program, or 2 years of work if they're in STEM fields. As a teacher, clearly I didn't qualify for STEM, and so my OPT offered me 1 year to work in the United States. And so of course I was gonna do it. It'd be great to get some income in US dollars, save that money, and then my hope was to get sponsored by the school I was working for. And sponsorship essentially entails your employer deciding to pay for your application to be put in a lottery system, and then you would get hopefully chosen by this random lottery that the US government does, and that would give you an actual work permit and you could stay in the States and continue to work. So that was my hope. Like at the end of that school year, I was going to be sponsored and then I was going to continue living in the States. And this was the school year 2017 to 2018. That was my first year actually teaching on my own. So that was my plan. I was gonna do it. The thing about trying to organize sponsorship is that you have to reach out to your employer very early. You can't, I think the application goes in for this lottery in about April. I haven't actually done this in so long, so I may be fudging some of the months here. So the application is usually due in April, which means that you want to be communicating with your employer around November about this. So, I approached my principal and, I, mentioned that this was something that I'm really interested in. And I got in contact with an immigration lawyer, and I got in contact with the school district, because my principal said, you know, he's not really in charge of like immigration processes for employees, so that I would have to go through like human resources for the entire school district. So I did that. I was working at a public school, by the way. Did that. My principal said yes, he wants to, you know, sponsor me. How does he go about doing this? Like, can he work with human resources and my immigration lawyer to try and work this out? The cost of everything was going to be about $5,000 to pay the immigration lawyer to complete this application, submit the application, pay for the processing fees, or everything that I needed to pay for would have come up to about $5,000 US. My principal was like, let's do it. You're a great teacher. You're a great asset to the school. So that was the plan. And then we were working on it. Not really working on the application. We were in conversation till about February. Remember I said that the application was due in like April. We hadn't actually got anything really done. So had another conversation with my principal, and you know, he told me that he had been in communication with like the district, like the lawyers that work for the district, and pretty much what happened was they weren't able to actually afford that amount of money to actually sponsor me. So the principal himself wanted me to stay, but it came down to the district not being able to afford me. Now, you know, there's this thing in the States where it's like, if you have like exceptional talent, then you could bypass this whole lottery system and you get this work permit. Obviously, there's no way that a teacher from Jamaica who has less than a year experience teaching, hasn't done like research or published books or come up with theories that have like changed some sort of field. Like that wasn't, I clearly didn't fall under that category. So like, it's really hard to convince a school district that they should invest $5,000 in a person who is going to enter this lottery system and then maybe, it's a slim chance actually, maybe get this work permit. So in the end, you know, we decided, well, more so I was told that it wouldn't really work out. Aww. Usually I would have been really bummed by this. Coffee break. Usually I would have been bummed by this, but for those of you who know, at this point, by 2017, I had a partner who was living in Canada. So at this point, this was a really good opportunity for me to actually now make the move to Canada. We had been dating for about a year at that point, but doing long distance between Toronto and Boston, because I was working in the Boston area. That's where my school was. So we would do flights back and forth. And for some reason, like, I thought that I was just gonna be working in the States and that he would move to the States. Like, I don't know why, that was just my perspective on the whole situation. But being rejected for the sponsorship actually now put me in a position to make this move to Canada. I had nothing really tying me to the States anymore. I spoke to my dad, as I always do, about these things, and you know, we decided that this was, you know, not a big deal, not a big setback that I didn't get sponsored. So the plan was, I'm gonna move to Canada. So at the end of that school year, that was June 2018, I finished the school year. I sadly said bye to all my students, you know, who I love dearly, and I said goodbye to my coworkers, and I, you know, like, sold my furniture, because I was actually living in shared like house, so it was me and 3 other girls, and I had my own room. I sold my furniture, I packed up some boxes, I shipped them to Toronto, and then I went home for the summer. So I went to Jamaica for the summer of 2018. You know, I always did that at this point. You know, I'd been going to school in the States since 2012, and at every like major holiday, like summer and winter break, I would go home. So this was just a pattern that I had fallen into at this point. So I went home summer of 2018, and then my dad and I started to do research, like how can I move to Canada? Obviously I can't just hop on a plane and just move there and start teaching. So we had to figure out like what was going to be my entry point into Toronto. So one of the ways that immigrants try to, you know, establish themselves in a new country is by going to school. I had done it in the States. You know, I did my undergrad, did my master's, and then I got that year of work after attached to my student visa. So we thought maybe this would be a good route to do in terms of going to Canada. I, you know, obviously had just graduated, so I didn't want to do another undergrad degree. Or bachelor's degree. I didn't want another master's degree. I was tired of school at this point, so I applied for like a certification program, which was like less intensive than a degree. It's only a year long, and so I thought, you know, this would be a really good way. And in Canada, they have a really good pathway program from being a student to being a permanent resident. It's much more efficient than the States. My plan was to apply to the certification program, be in this like school environment for a year, work for a year, and then I would apply to be a permanent resident. That was my plan. But you know, your plan in life happens. So at this point, I think we sent out the application. I applied to Humber for teaching ESL, which is teaching English as a second language. That was what I wanted to get my certification in. I applied to Humber, I got into the program, and mistakenly, like in my head thought because I got into this program at Humber, that meant like I was moving to Canada. So I started telling everyone like, I'm moving to Canada, yay, like I'm leaving Jamaica again, I'm gonna move. And like, don't ever do that. Don't, unless you're really confident, don't share your plans unless it's signed, sealed, delivered. Like until you're on the plane, pretty much touchdown. So I mean, it was a little embarrassing what happens next. So after I went around telling everyone I'm moving, you know, told my partner we're finally going to be in the same place, and there's one step obviously between getting accepted into a program in Canada and actually moving there, which is applying for a visa. So my dad and I, we had done this before. We had filled out applications for student visas before because we had to do it for my undergrad. Now that I look back at it, we didn't really have much experience with the Canadian visa application. We didn't do it right. I think we filled out parts of the form wrong. So for example, they asked what have you, all of your addresses or something like that for the past 10 years. And we excluded my address in Jamaica, because I was currently living there in Jamaica because I'd come home. Currently living there, didn't put that address as the first one. I just immediately started from the house that I left in Boston. And then there are other few mistakes that I made. Hi, buddy. Hey, buddy. You could have heard him crying. Yeah, so he's gonna be in my lap. He's gonna be joining us. Okay, so yeah, so we did not fill out the application correctly. Obviously, they asked for your education experience, and I put my master's, and my master's is in teaching, and I put my bachelor's, which was in a bachelor's in psychology. So remember, I did not put that I was currently living in Jamaica. Keep that in mind. So I brought that up earlier for a particular reason. We submitted the application. I was like, this is great. I'm just waiting for the visa. I'm out of here. Like I literally in my mind had a date when I was leaving Jamaica. So I remember this summer very vividly, the summer of 2018, because one of my friends got married. I went to Ghana for her wedding that summer. So I remember this summer very vividly. We got the email like, you know, your application has been completed and you've been denied this visa. Aww. Can I just say that my heart sunk? Like, I don't know if I've ever experienced disappointment like that before in my life. Try and like imagine it from my perspective. I had not gotten sponsored after working my first job as a teacher, like, which is what I wanted to do with my life. So I was forced to go home. Moving back home after home being Jamaica, moving back home after 7 years. Like, I hadn't lived with my parents in so long, and now, you know, you went from being able to just leave whenever you wanted and not really having to answer to anyone, you know, as a university student living on campus, to now having to, you know, be like, you know, I didn't have to ask my parents for permission. I was still an adult. I was 22 at the time, turning 23, but it was like, oh, well, I'll be home at this time, and oh, you know, my parents would be like, can you do these chores? And it was just like very strange to kind of go back into that space. So that was my like situation at the time, and my answer to solving all of that uncertainty was I was gonna move to Canada. And then I got denied. So the reason that they gave, you know, they denied my visa was, one, they said I was overqualified for the program I got accepted to, which makes sense. I have a master's degree, and here I was applying for a certification program in education. Granted, it was teaching ESL, which was a part of my master's program. So I suspect the immigration officers, when they looked at my application, were really confused as to why this candidate who just got their master's degree is trying to go and get a certificate. Like, they probably were like, this person is going to try and use this pathway, like go to school and then work permit and get permanent residency. Probably is what they figured out. Except the second reason I got denied was that I didn't prove that I was coming home after my program, right? So by not putting my address as my current address, it wasn't clear that I was going to like leave Canada after, right? Because they know that my US visa was up, and then what was I doing? So I think to them it looked very suspicious that all of a sudden I'm just leaving Jamaica, I guess, while leaving the States, and then going to Canada and then not having anywhere to go after. So their concern was like, where is this person gonna go? Are they just gonna stay in Canada? So I got denied. Then that was fun, having to tell everyone like, why, you know, why I'm still in Jamaica 4 months later. I was unemployed. My plan was always to leave, so I didn't want to get a job and then leave, you know, midway in the year or something like that. So got denied my student visa. This was about September-ish of 2018. No plans to get a job. Living with my parents again, coming back home to a country I hadn't really lived in 7 years. Doing long distance still. That's my life at this point. And then I decided, you know what, we're gonna, you know, my dad and I decided we're gonna get an immigration lawyer, and we did. And so got an immigration lawyer. We'd decided that the best program for me to apply for is something called International Experience Canada, which, for those people who don't know what that is, it's a work exchange program where Canada offers people with particular passports, meaning you're a citizen of specific countries, like they grant them permission or time or work permit to work in Canada. Luckily for me, I'm a dual citizen. I'm a citizen of both the United Kingdom and Jamaica. United Kingdom happened to be one of the countries that were on the list for this program. I applied. I literally remember applying, and like I would just be anxious for weeks waiting for this decision because I just got denied a visa. And you know, like, what if they denied me again? Then what? I waited. We filled out the application properly this time. So one tip that I definitely have if you're trying to immigrate to Canada is, if you can afford it, get an immigration consultant. And if not, read every single part of that application over and over and over with a fine-tooth comb. Look over every single thing. Research what every question means if you're unsure. Ensure that you have documentation to prove that you're coming back. You know, even though my hope was to eventually apply for permanent residency, I had to make it very clear that I was coming back. So, you know, showing like evidence that you have an address in your home country, that most of your family lives there, that you're interested in getting a job there. Like, that's what I was essentially showing, that I was gonna go teach in Canada for 2 years and bring those skills back to Jamaica. And I ensured that this time with this application that was very clear, and I got approved. So if you are a UK citizen, definitely explore this program, International Experience Canada. It's a really great visa program, and I got to finally go to Canada. And as soon as I got there, I think I landed in May 2019, and I would be like on Indeed, I would be on LinkedIn, I would be looking for jobs every single day. Within 2 weeks, I found a teaching job. And my plan was to apply for the Express Entry program. So that's probably why most of you are here. You're curious about the Express Entry program. So I already knew that I wanted to apply under the Canadian Experience class category of the Express Entry program. So for those of you who don't know, the Express Entry program is an immigration program that permits or gives or grants permanent residency to people who apply and are approved. There is no pathway. Through this program, you are automatically granted permanent residency if you're approved. So this is a program that quite a few immigrants are attracted to, because naturally permanent residency grants you the stability that a work permit would not, or a student visa would not. There are 3 categories under which you can apply for this Express Entry program. You know, you have the Federal Skilled Worker Program, the Federal Trades Worker Program, and then the Canadian Experience class. Canadian Experience class is reserved for people who have Canadian work experience. And the way that this program works is that they have a variety of categories that they assign various points to based on your answers to some of these categories. So for example, age. The younger you are, the more points you get, because Canada is looking for younger immigrants who they feel like will essentially last longer in the labor force. Speaking French will give you more points, because obviously Canada is a bilingual country, so speaking both languages makes you more of an asset. If you have a master's degree, you'll get more points than someone who only has a bachelor's degree. If you have a PhD, you get more points than someone who has just a master's, because they're looking for the most educated immigrants. In terms of like degrees, obviously you can be very educated without a degree. They're looking for, you know, if you have family members here, so you'll get more points, let's say if you have a parent here or a spouse here, because again, they're looking for, you know, maybe building families that will come up to Canada. If you have Canadian work experience, you get more points than someone who only has, you know, work experience in another country. Anyway, unfortunately, if you're only working in your home country, you don't get as much points as someone who has Canadian work experience. So that's why I was like, I want to go to Canada, get the work experience, and then apply for express entry. I taught for a year. You know, my work permit lasted 2 years, but I didn't want the 2 years to be over and my permanent residency was not approved. Because again, as an immigrant, you always worry about what happens if your visa time expires. You know, I already had to leave the United States because I wasn't sponsored. I worked in Canada for a year teaching, and then I applied for express entry. So the way it works is I created a profile on the Government of Canada website. I used the same immigration consultant that helped me with my work permit because, you know, he's awesome. I'll put his like information in the description if anyone is interested. And I created my profile. I think I had like almost 500 points, like maybe like 475 points. So based on my age at the time, I would have been 25, so I was younger. You know, having a partner that lives in Canada who's a citizen boosts your points. I had Canadian work experience. You also have to take an English test. So the test is called the IELTS test. Bane of my existence. I hate taking standardized tests. It doesn't matter if your first language is English. I'm an English teacher. I had to take this test. The higher you score on the test, the more points you get. So I think I got perfect in almost all 4 categories. And because of that, that also contributed to my points. So I applied, created my profile, and then you have to wait to I didn't apply. I created my profile on the Government of Canada website, then you have to wait to be invited to apply for your permanent residency. And the way that it works is they do this like draw where they essentially draw the profiles of all the immigrants who submitted a profile on the website, and they invite people to apply based on a particular point threshold. So what I mean by that, let's say in the month of November, let's say the Government of Canada or the immigration like portion of the government is like, we're going to have a draw, but only people who have 450 points and higher will be invited to apply. Then everyone who like kind of meets that requirement in terms of points will get invited to apply. Everyone who doesn't will have to wait till the next draw. So I got invited to apply literally 1 week. I don't even think it was a week. Maybe a couple days, 2 days or something after I submitted my profile. So I was very happy. I had 90 days to collect all my documents to then submit an application. And I'm talking about like, so you have to get like a police report or like a criminal background check for every single country that you lived in for more than 6 months. So Jamaica, Canada, because I've been living in Canada and working for about a year at this point, and then the States, because I had been living in the States for 7 years. Then you have to do a medical, like a medical checkup, but it could only be by a certain like approved clinics or doctors. So I did that. I had to submit my passports. I had to submit my travel history for the past decade. So I had to literally go through every single flight that I've taken for the past 10 years, put it on a spreadsheet that had to be uploaded, all my past addresses. You have to do something called a job letter, which means that you have to get your employer to essentially tell the Government of Canada how long you've been working there, what are your roles as, you know, in this job, how much you make, and what a lot of people mistake is when you're doing this process, there's something called an NOC code or a knock code, which basically on the job bank of Canada this number correlates to a particular position or career or job. And you have to get this knock code correct. And the description of the career has to match what you do. So for example, as a secondary school teacher, and I think I might show it up here to make it clear what I'm saying. As a secondary school teacher, let's say my knock code is like 401A. It will have like 10 things that a typical secondary school teacher will do. In my job letters from my employers, it has to kind of detail the things that I do in my job, and it has to match that knock code. This is where a lot of people get denied. If you put the wrong knock code, you're automatically denied. And then two, if your description doesn't match the description, then the government, well, the immigration portion of the government of Canada will think that you're actually not doing that job. So you have to be super careful about this. So what I suggest people do is kind of detail to the employer exactly what you need to have in the letter. So for example, I literally sent like bullet points to both employers, both in the States and in Canada, being like, you have to have my NOC code, you have to have how much I make, you have to have how long I was working there, you have to have what I do on a day-to-day basis. And I would just copy and paste everything from the government website and be like, this is what a secondary school teacher does. This has to be in my job letter. So did that. What else did I have to submit for my application? You have to submit, well, you have to show or prove that you have the amount of money that is required to move here. So something to also keep in mind. So you have to have proof of your finances. So once I did all of that, it took me about, I literally think I was down to the wire. I, got my invitation to apply in December, and my deadline was February 25th or something, and I maybe applied February 22nd. But I did it. I applied. And then you have to wait. And this would have been 2021. So I submitted my application for PR in 2021 after working with a work permit in Canada for about a year, and this would have been now a year and a half, which meant that my work visa was coming to an end, and I had just submitted this application for permanent residency. But what people don't know is you can apply for an extension on your work permit, or you can apply for a bridging work permit. A bridging work permit pretty much allows you to keep your work permit for the duration of that break between when your work permit expires and when your new application is accepted. So that's what I got, just to make sure that there was no gaps where I was working without a work permit. So submitted my PR in February 2021, and I got approved in I think July or August 2021, because it's a 6-month process that you have to wait. And then I had to wait for my PR card. So the thing is that you cannot actually travel, you can't leave the country without this card. This is essentially your travel document. So even though I was approved for PR, I couldn't leave the country. And technically they're supposed to, once you get approved, you're supposed to get your PR card within a couple of weeks. I didn't get it until December of 2021. So I got approved for my PR in July 2021, didn't get the card till December 2021, and I had to send follow-up email after follow-up email, but eventually I got it. And now I'm here, 2022, almost a year later, and I'm officially a permanent resident. And I'm not sure if I'll become a citizen. That's something I still have to decide. But that's my journey, and I hope it was really helpful. And please, I'm thinking of doing a Q&A about immigrating to Canada, because I feel like people are really interested and have a lot of questions. And with my research and experience with doing this, I'm fairly knowledgeable now, particularly with the Express Entry program. I haven't done the International Experience Canada program in so long, so I'm not as versed in that, but I'd be really happy to answer any questions you have. So feel free to send me a question or leave a question in the comments. I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Say bye, Loki.
Bye bye, Papa. Bye.